Tuesday, the second day of Kislev, corresponding to the third day of December 2024. Please bear with me for a few moments for today's dedication. Today's special breakfast and class, graciously sponsored by Itzik Gansburg and family in honor of the Yortzeit of Maran Hagaon Hasadik Rabbi Aharon ben Rabbi Shneur Kotler, alav shalom. Additionally, today's special breakfast and class, graciously sponsored by Mrs. Rochelle Suster, La'ilui Nishmat, her beloved husband, Haim ben Sara, alav shalom. Today's class, also dedicated La'ilui Nishmat, my dear aunt, Violeta Bat Esther, aleh shalom. Iratzon that to the words of Torah, their neshamot be elevated in Gan Eden. Amen. So, amen. Yes. So, I was asked to speak about two things that are happening, and also about the great Tzaddik who rewrote the face of America through the yeshiva system, the great Rabbi Kotler from Lakewood, that today is his Yortzeit, the founder, actually, which he was definitely a Gadol by Israel, and we'll speak about it in a few moments. But I was also asked to speak about the kinus of the Shluchim that took place in New York this past weekend, in which over 6,000 rabbis, maybe even more, gathered together for a couple of days of workshops and encouragement and support and unity, and obviously highlighted regretfully by the tragedy of the murder of Rabbi Tzvi Kogan, Hashem Yinkom Damo, the young rabbi that was killed, God forbid, at the UAE, I believe, literally a week ago, I will say, and definitely a big strike to Am Israel. Yes, so B'ezrat Hashem, we hope and pray that he'll be beseeching Shamayim for the welfare of the Jewish people, and we should have only Besurot Tovot. Amen. I was provided with some highlight of the life of the great Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Aharon Kotler, who lived over 70 years in life. He was niftar in the year 1962. So we're going back a couple of years. But it's imperative that we tell about the early days in order to understand what's happening today in front of us. The city of Lakewood, as we know, there are many wonderful cities up north. You can call it the borough of Brooklyn, Borough Park, Kroonhuis, Williamsburg, Flatbush, Muncie, Bensonhurst, New Square, Monroe, Bloomington, I think it's called, or Blooming something. So you think more cities are expanding as the Jewish population, the Torah Jewish population is growing tremendously. So this is besides Deal and the Jersey Shore and the Flatbush area for the Syrian community, but the city of Lakewood became too small. Today, Lakewood, right, Rabbi? Is this a relative of yours? A grandfather? A grandmother. No, your wife's grandfather. I knew it. Chazak Baruch. Okay. Anyways, the city of Lakewood today, it's huge. Thousands relocated from Brooklyn to move to Lakewood to have an environment of Torah, but not only for the yeshivish world. Today, there are hundreds of Syrian families who live in Lakewood. Torah observance, obviously, nobody goes to Lakewood to go to Target and Walmart. You have to understand, people, or bingo is different. Bingo is a holy place, you know. You have a minyan there every day. Baruch Hashem is a mega supermarket, all kasher. That's a beautiful beracha. But today, Lakewood expanded into, I think it's called Tom's River. Jackson, and there is one more. The- Brick, no Brickell. Brickell is in downtown Miami. Hamavdil ben Kodesh Lahol. Okay, Bricktown. Thank you. But let's go to the early days of the city of Lakewood. What was the city of Lakewood? Probably was like in America, rural, midtown, the downtown center, farmland, right? That's it. Hazako Baruch. So we have somebody who probably lived around those days. Okay, it's a compliment. So when the great rabbi, and it's imperative, I think, that I go through some of the highlights of the rabbi. He went to the yeshiva, very nice. But then, and here is very interesting, that when the First World War became activated, the yeshiva moved from place to place in Russia, I believe, and eventually relocated to the place called Vilna. And many yeshivot, because of what's going on in that part of the world, they relocated to Japan and China. And many of them, regretfully, many yeshivot from all over, some of them were arrested and sent to Siberia, we know, and Kazakhstan. Additionally, the great rabbi came to America 1941, and he had a great relationship, by the way, with many contemporary Talmidei Chachamim of that generation. We're going back, if the rabbi passed away over 50 years ago, 50 some years ago, okay, actually 60 years ago, 62 years ago, so we need to think who were the Gedolim that existed back then. So it says, listen to this now. 1943, the Rosh Yeshiva established the famous BMG, Bedrash Gavoha. How many students they had? 15 when they started. A handful, barely a minyan and a half. When he passed away 20 years later, the yeshiva had 250 students. Later on, they made a census, and already by 2019, they had close to 7,000 students. And probably by now, 5 years later, that number increased tremendously. Now, think for a moment, and Baruch Hashem, Lakewood is in the map. So many Sephardic synagogues are in Lakewood, Syrian synagogues are in Lakewood, Hasidic villages, literally, they go and they buy land to build 1,500 homes. It's not to build 2 condominiums. It's to build homes, kosher homes, with Pesach kitchens, with meat and dairy, with plenty of bedrooms, indoors sukkah, swimming pools, ashgahot, the whole matter. And imagine yourself today how many thousands of Yehudim are gravitating to that area based on the efforts made by a great rabbi going back 1943. So we're talking about 80 years ago. 80 years ago. Think for a moment. What happened 80 years ago besides the Holocaust that was like 75 years ago? America was a spiritual desert, midbar. Even though there were many people, that doesn't mean that there was a lot of action. Through the years, every group, let's be honest, there was America before the Holocaust and America after the Holocaust. And Baruch Hashem, for the benefit of the Jewish people. The entire American Jewish world developed tremendously. All groups, starting from the Syrian community and the various groups within the Sephardic tradition, in the Ashkenazic tradition, in the Hasidic tradition, the many Hasidic dynasties were mostly wiped out during the Holocaust, and a handful came and were able to reactivate and to recreate what was something special 75, 80, 90 years ago. And the world of the yeshivot and kolelim and networks. And again, we only talked about BMG, Bet Midrash Gavoha, that has many buildings in order to have 7,000 rabbinical students, all ages. Obviously, there are no minors there, more than 7,000, but those are those learning. Then you have the wives, then you have the children, then you have all the myriads of yeshivot and shtibalach and Chabad houses and all over that makes American life today a very special. So therefore, the zechut of the investment of the great Rosh Yeshiva, alav shalom, which if you allow me to go one more minute before we talk about the topic of the Gemara of today, I'd like to tell you who were some of his famous students. I'm not going to say every one of them, but I'm going to say a handful that we are able to connect. Number one, there was a great Talmid Chacham by the name of Rabbi Shlomo Brevda, mega Talmid Chacham. The famous musician, singer Shlomo Karlebach, alav shalom, that we spoke about it. Now, the great rabbi from Baltimore, Rabbi Heinemann, from the Star K, the current Rosh Yeshiva in Bnei Brak, Rabbi Moshe Hirsch, the great Rosh Yeshiva, which is considered today one of the greatest Hachamim and Tzaddikim of our days, especially in the United States, Rabbi Shmuel Kamenetsky from Philadelphia, and the chief rabbi of Bnei Brak that regretfully passed away a few years ago, Rabbi Shlomo Korach, Rabbi Shlomo Miller from Toronto, Rabbi Gedalia Shor, Rabbi Eli Shvei. All of these names, maybe for the Kahal, may be foreign name, because we usually may be more connected and known to Sephardic Hachamim, but take my word for it. Each and every one of these Hachamim that I mentioned became great Hachamim for American Jewry. We need to understand the foundation, Hazaku Baruch. You know how many Syrian boys go to Philly? You know how many Syrian families are in Lakewood, in BMG and other Syrian Kolelim? Is beyond our understanding how the effort of someone who basically survived the first war, survived the second war, experienced many miracles for their survivals, and as I said yesterday in the ladies' classes yesterday, somebody tells me, Rabbi, this is this student's birthday today. So obviously I wish her happy birthday, okay? And then somebody made a comment, nice comment, and I said that I read somewhere that when a person celebrates the birthday, this is how Hashem in a loving way is telling the person, I need you in the world. I have a mission for you in the world. A shaliach, I was talking to a rabbi that I met, to my knowledge, for the first time over Shabbat. Guess what? We met each other over 45 years ago. Remember I told you? I said we met 45 years ago. We were students in the same building. We were in different floors. And then I said, you look familiar. He tells me, you also look familiar. So I said, okay, So we started to talk. Ah, yeah, here, there. I know this fellow. Oh, that was my roommate. So, and he tells me something very fascinating. He's a rabbi, but for certain family scenarios, he's a businessman, which is wonderful. Nothing wrong with it. To be a rabbi and a businessman is very nice. But it says that he does a lot of outreach work through his business. And he come across many unaffiliated Jews. And as the Baal Shem Tov says, that whenever you come across Yehudim, especially if they are on the unaffiliated department yet, throw something into the neshama, because the words do activate the spirit. Beautiful. And he told me that he has two sons, I think, that do outreach in college campuses. Okay, something that I spoke to you about my relatives in UC Davis, that based on what I understood, it's one of the most liberal schools in America today. They are the founding fathers of the BDS movement, I believe. That's their pride, God forbid, and that's what they have to deal with, and they trying to rescue and to elevate neshamot. And again, they ask. I'll finish with the following statement before I switch the topic. I'm sure the Kahal heard of a great rabbi in Flatbush by the name of Rabbi Zechariah Wallerstein, right? Alav Shalom, or Na'ava. Mega outreach master. Regretfully, he left the world at a very young age, just a few years ago. And if he can tell you stories, he deals with people when they are, God forbid, in closer to the other side than to this side. And allow me to clarify. Closer to the other side doesn't mean that they are 80 or 90 years old. They are 15, 17, 19, 20 years old, that through addictions and other types of vices, they have nowhere to go. Believe me, you need to have a special neshama to deal with this. So somebody asked him, how can you deal? And I asked this question to my niece and nephew, that they are outreach rabbis in UC Davis in California. He tells me that he was trained, don't ask questions. Welcome them to experience the Shabbat, a holiday, etc. And share me a video clip that there was a Palestinian protest in school, and one young man was putting on tefillin in front of them. Unbelievable. The police is involved, obviously, all the time. But he tells me, and I ask him, when he tells me these crazy stories, and I don't want to repeat them because I do not know all the details, but he was told, don't ask questions. Welcome, receive, inspire them. Don't ask, because you're going to get answers. I'll tell you one. I don't even know what's the name of this condition, but he told me that there is a group of students that they are doing an experiment, and the experiment goes something like feeling where you are not. Does that make sense anything to you? So I told him, give me an example. I don't understand. So we understand that we have the how does a person identity crisis, right? Oy vey, undefined, undecided, rather not to answer, male, female, you have a few options now. God forbid. God forbid. It says that now the experiment was to be called an object. I don't even know what that means. I asked him, I don't understand. He told me this in my home. He says, one student said, now I'm trying to feel how a couch feels, how a sofa feels. I don't understand what that means. I'm even embarrassed to tell you this. So when he's telling me these stories, I ask myself, if we see someone coming to pray in our synagogue with shorts, you know, we say, what's going on, right? Or if somebody comes to the knees with a cup of coffee, we say, look at the sign. But can you imagine somebody is your Shabbat guest on your Shabbat table and they're telling you all these things and they criticize Israel because that's how they are brainwashed? Sure, it's a new wave now. Madness. Of course. So you know what he answered me? Something similar that also Rabbi Wallerstein alav shalom said. I don't see bodies. I see neshamot. You get it? I don't see the body, because if I have to see the body, Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi, I was sharing with them our encounter 40 some years ago. Yes, happy one. So we're telling about the outreach being done. So I asked my nephew, I don't understand. Each case that you're telling me, it's worse than the previous one. I thought that we have challenges. We are in Gan Eden. So anyone, I'm speaking now to the audience of Torah and company, that anyone that Baruch Hashem is part of an established community, a knis, a rabbi, a Torah class, and we live in normal cities, be thankful. Ashrenu matov helkenu uma na'im goralenu. You know, somebody shared with me a clip of the kinus that took place in New York over this weekend. Okay, to live in Buenos Aires, Sao Paulo, Brazil, Pittsburgh, Miami, it's comfortable. But imagine living in Sri Lanka. Do you know what that is in the map? Or in Casablanca? Or in all these places that I don't even know the name? In Russia? Or in the Ukraine? You have missiles flying all over, and probably they don't have what we have. The young man said the right statement. Ashrenu matov helkenu. How fortunate we are that we have what we have. Sometimes people worry, I don't have. All these situations in the world, as I said before, can you imagine, opening Lakewood Yeshiva with 15 students? 15, 1-5. Or the Kinus, when I mentioned the number, I wasn't exaggerating. Over 6,500, right? Rabbis and people that came for a weekend. Can you imagine 6,500 rabbis together? If you have 3 rabbis together, you already have too many, right? Oh, too many rabbis. Can you imagine 6,500 rabbis? And the neshamot that they saved. I had a case the other day. Somebody was going to Bahamas. I don't know what's there. I was told that there is a nice kosher restaurant. Hotel? Kosher hotel? Hotel with kosher food. Minyanim, etc. And the first thing he asked me a lucky question. I said, I don't know Bahamas. I know where Bahamas is in the map. But why are you calling me? No, because you know a lot. I said, I know a lot, but I know nothing about Bahamas. He said, so who are you going to call? I said, what's the problem? Isn't there a Chabad house in Bahamas? Oh, I didn't think. Okay, Baruch Hashem. He called, he found a minyan, he found kosher food, everything was handled. So as I said before, the Gemara writes, Arbe Sheluchim Lamakom. God has many messengers, and every one of us is a Shaliach for a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So the Zachut of the Tzaddikim that we discussed earlier today should be Maginim Alenu, should vouch for all of us, and we should have Besorot Tovot. Amen. With all this being said, Gemara of today talks about wives. Should I talk about it or skip it? And nobody's saying nothing. Talk about it, right? I wasn't really asking. But anyways, comes again and it says as follows. Isha tova matana tova leba'ala. Nice statement. A good wife is a gift to the husband. So I know that somebody listening or watching may say, Rabbi, so what if your wife is not good? God forbid. Hazve shalom. I don't think that there's no such a thing that a wife is not good. You need to know this. Based on what's written by our holy rabbis, the relationship between husband and wife, it's something that needs to get developed. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, effort, humility, irat shamayim, midot tovot, polishing. Thank you very much. It's coming soon. Polishing our essence, as we discussed this Gemara. The opening statement of this Gemara was actually last week's on Tuesday. Obviously, that we just heard patience, the way the great Pele Yoez writes, to have savlanut, to have patience and tolerance is not an option, it's actually required. And he brings down different scenarios with different examples. And he explains dosages, hamavdil, without comparison. But let's say vitamins or medicines, they come with dosages, 2.5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, 20 milligrams, 30 milligrams. You buy a vitamin, 5,000 units, whatever that means in the language of vitamins. But Hamavdil, he says the same thing in patience. There is tolerance and patience in the marriage. There is another level when it comes to parenting. There is another level when it comes to being a teacher, when it comes to being a rabbi, when you run a business, when you have employees, the way that we discuss on Shabbat afternoon. Shabbat afternoon, someone asked a very interesting question about the Perashah. The beginning of Perashah, Toledot tells us that Yaakov Avinu was cooking the meal for his father. This was called in Jewish law Seudat Avraham. Avraham Avinu passed away. He was buried. You need to give them food. So what does he do? He cooks. And right away, somebody says, I don't understand. Yaakov Avinu doesn't have enough people at home that is able to order or tell them do this, etc. So interesting enough, we quoted a few sources. One of them was the Rambam, Maimonides, that it says, and others, by the way, the Tohachat Chaim by Rabbi Chaim Palachi, Rabbi Moshe Bar Maimon, the Rambam in Ilchot Avadim, and there was one third source brought down by the Ish L'Re'ehu book. And there he says that the Torah is teaching us a beautiful midah from Yaakov Avinu, that even though he did have the manpower to help him, but yet he says, why should I bother them if I'm able to do it? Especially the Rambam says that if they are sleeping or they are eating, let's say in the lunch break, don't bother them. If they are resting, let them sleep. If they are doing something personal, keep your distance. And then the Rabbi Chaim Palashi says, Imazeh Shehem kinyan kaspohu. And he says, if this is how the Rambam, Maimonides, writes about an Aved, what's the meaning of the word Aved? You know what Aved means? Slave. What's the meaning of slave? You went to the market and you bought him. You pay the price. Yes, I'm looking for a slave. Okay, the slaves have different prices. The Gemara discusses this in Masechet Baba Kama, right? Perek HaChovel, how do you determine the value? So the question is age, strength, if he has 2 arms or 1. Haz v'shalom, Amavdil. But back then, that's how it was. You own a person. Here, if the Haddame comes twice a week on time, we are happy. If the Shikse comes twice a week on time, we are happy. And if Monday or Friday doesn't show up, oh, somebody asked me a long time ago, is there a prayer to guarantee that the maid will come in honor of Shabbat? I said, you should say, Lichvot Shabbat Kodesh, Hashem. True question, by the way. Somebody asked me a while back if the help that they bring to help the home in honor of Shabbat is considered part of Kavod Shabbat. The answer is yes. I saw it in writing, one of the poskim, I do not remember who, but it says, if the presence of the cleaning help at home minimizes the stress level on the Shabbat, on Friday, because we already know the way it says in many Sefarim HaKedoshim that Friday, because it's the first day in the history of mankind that an Avon was made, Adam and Hava, sin on Friday. So every Friday, this is written in the Sefer, I have it in my office, by Rabbi Moshe Zakai, I think from Beneverak, a great Sephardic Rosh Yeshiva. And it says, he quotes a source, and it says that every Friday is the most challenging moment in the home of every Yehudi, because the Yetzer Hara looks for customers to hinder the preparation of Shabbat. Meaning to say, if there is an argument, if there is a discussion, something, I was able to mitigate the preparations for Shabbat. So therefore it says, Yehaz kocho, it says, muster up your strength, literally, and try to be as calm and patient, as tolerant, especially during the time where the tension and the stress level is above the norm. Good morning. Great seeing you. Fascinating. The Gemara writes, discussing different elements when it comes to marriage. So one of the things that I saw by the great Rabbi Shalom Arush, the famous rabbi who is a master in this topic and many other wonderful topics, and he says, he quotes a pasuk from Shlomo HaMelech, and it says, marriage, it's like the reflection of a mirror. Shlomo HaMelech talks about the water. Kamayim apanim el apanim ken lev ha'adam el ha'adam. Basically, this pasuk means, what happens if I look at the water? The water has like a certain mirror imaging. Then if I look at the water with a serious face, my face will appear serious. If I smile, the water smiles back at me. He writes and it says that the same concept is when it comes to marriage. Meaning to say, I think that what the great rabbi message is that basically if we get something that we don't like, maybe it's because we are emitting or providing something that is not nice. And I know that somebody in the virtual audience, not in the physical audience at least, but in the virtual audience may say, Rabbi, you don't know my wife. I don't know your wife, but I know Torah. I know Torah. And I think it's a cue. For example, many years ago, there was an article in a newspaper, secular article, that talks about how to create a friendly environment and a healthy environment in the workforce. Well, he says because many times people change jobs not because they don't like what they do or they're not getting paid for their efforts, simply because sometimes the work environment becomes, I don't want to say the word hostile, but a bit toxic. And there is drama. When you and I spoke to you in the morning, what did I say to you? Stay where you are. What did I say to you? Stay where you are. You're happy. You're getting paid on time. There is room to grow. Your spiritual needs are taken care of. Hazak Baruch. Nice, even better. Nice, even holier environment. Wow, very nice, very good. Hazak Baruch. They didn't know this concept, which is unbelievable. Today, there is a how do I say this? There is a group, a movement that is saving lives. But not because we're dealing, God forbid, with drama or addictions, but they're saving lives by establishing fences of spiritual protection in the workplace. Literally, if it's the topic of Ichud, the prohibition of a man and a woman not married to be alone in a private setting, the distance, name calling, if you call by the first name, or you say Mrs. I know that to some of us may say, Rabbi, you're telling me I have to call my assistant Mrs.? According to the holy rabbis, you should. Because by not putting the name Mr. or Mrs., it shows like a lack of distance. Again, we're not saying that if you call your assistant by the first name, you're doing a sin. But I'm telling you to what level of sensitivity there's certain work environments are activating. You know why? Because the Gemara says, En apotrophos la'arayot. There is no insurance policy against temptation. How holy you are, how doesn't matter who you are. Great people fell. So the Torah gives us the guidelines, the fences. When the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, Mishnah number 1, right in the beginning, tells us 3 lessons for life. Number 1, Hevu metunim badin, be cautious in your ruling, meaning to say somebody asks you a question, don't jump to answer. Obviously, there are certain questions that are easy to answer. If you ask me, Rabbi, what time is Mincha and Arvit tonight? I'm going to tell you. Rabbi, can you tell me if this supervision is reliable? I said, I'll check on the list and I'll answer you. But let's say that the question is much more complicated of davening times or kosher restaurants or supervision. Questions of halakha or even questions which are, yesterday we received a question about cash advance business. That's a chapter by itself. We're not discussing it, but it's not a business that we tell the person run, because you're dealing with a lot of rebate issues, interest that you're generating for the investor or that you're collecting from the borrower. And there is, even though there are certain parameters known in Jewish law as a ter iska, which is a halachically binding document that reformulates the transaction, and there are batei dinim that specializes in this type of halachic questions. It's not just, okay, bring a tissue and let's write, okay, 2 words, eter iska, chazak baruch. It's not so. You have to delegate it to a bedin that is competent in Hoshen Mishpat. And Hoshen Mishpat is not a simple the volume of the Shulchan Aruch that deals with all financial matters. Yesterday, another question. Stealing intellectual property. That was the question. I had a case like this 2 years ago. And as soon as the call came, I listened. I said, it's no brainer. Not allowed. Geneva dat, number one. Then you have Milevar Sheker Tirhak. You're stealing, you're capitalizing on the efforts that the person made. And I had a case like this 2 or 3 years ago. And we did the research, we formulated the questions to the big Hachamim, and unanimously says, it's not even a question. Not allowed, not allowed, not allowed. That's it. There are people who play shticks. That's the problem. There are people who play games. And that's why the Talmud says, one of the 3 ways that you recognize a person is anger management, drinking habit, and financial matters. And this fellow cloned a website, and he made a tiny change to redirect to him when people intended to go to a certain web page for certain matters. Thank God there is a Din Torah going on now, and hopefully the person will be a good listener and will take a step back and not take advantage of what other people do. That was one particular case. Another case was a certain type of, how do I say this? Investment in a certain type of business. Sounded interesting. But then last night, I called somebody to get an advice. I said, this person is asking me. I don't know what to say. I already said, I don't know. But he says, please, can you help me? I said, I can make a phone call for you. I asked a dear friend of mine that is Hacham. Hacham, in this term, doesn't necessarily mean that he's a Hacham from the Talmud, but he's a Hacham from life, because the Mishnah calls a Hacham someone that went through life. En Hacham kebaal anisayon. You're going to get advice from a rabbi that is not in the world of business, as much as I may know from their questions and life experience, but somebody that is a bit older and has been 40, 50 years in business can give more advice. You know what he told me? He says, Rabbi, tell that person to run away from that business. How kosher it is. He says the environment of that business is not kosher. You understand the difference? The business transaction could be okay. It's like, and he brought me an example. I'm not happy to tell you this example, but I think that this example, it can make us understand. Imagine yourself, there is a non-kosher, when I mean kosher, means taref website, and you are the host of their server. You understand? You may say, I don't touch. Yeah, but you are the vehicle. You are the vehicle. Deep words. Deep words. Obviously, I don't want anybody to draw halachic rulings and guidelines from a few minutes shiur, but I'm only sharing these things that I'm an eyewitness, because at the end of the day, when the Mishnah tells us, Hevu metunin badin, don't jump. If there is a concept of time, do it. The second one, the famous Mishnah says, He'emidu talmidim harbe, the establishment of a lot of Torah students. Remember, I said a few minutes ago when I started with Lakewood, 1943 began with 15 Students, today, over 7,000. We don't understand. You know how many generations that is? All over the world. And the third one, the famous Mishnah that says, Asu Sayag La Torah. Build fences of protection. Even though many matters may appear to be fine and okay and acceptable, but if it's going to be boundaries that a person needs to cross, and those boundaries are spiritually not only not beneficial, but they become detrimental for the person, maybe the person needs to also have the self control and the discipline to take a step back. So the Gemara continues discussing the topics of marriage. But bottom line, just to summarize this, that if there is a couple that got married, Kedat Moshe Israel, in the proper way, that means that Hakadosh Baruch Hu has a plan for the person, for the family, etc. Oh, you may say, but Rabbi, there are people who got married not in the proper way. God gave the person the blessing? Obviously not. The person also has Behira Hafshit. We have humans, and therefore we have the freedom of choice to determine what to do and what not to do, and based on our actions, we have to deal with the consequences. But when this question, Bichlal, doesn't apply, and everybody's kasher and everybody's Jewish, and there are no questions whatsoever, and there are matters that are going on in the relationship, the best solution is, besides praying, is making the effort to become better and better. And I'll tell you one thing, don't make the mistakes that people do. I'm telling you, as a rabbi, I deal occasionally with some cases. I'm dealing now with three, I should say, three very, very challenging cases. And can I tell you what's the common denominator of all of them? Even though money could be in part when people go through financial struggles, but it's all about personality. Who is willing to yield? Who is willing to be mevater? Who is able to exercise self-control in the responses? Who is able to think in a mature way and not, God forbid, the opposite? Okay, my good friends, I wish everybody to have a beautiful day. We'll have a few minutes, the Spanish class, broadcasting live via iTorah.com. ברוך אדוני לעולם, אמן ואמן. רבי חנניה בן הקשיא אומר, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות את ישראל לפיכך